here with us.
Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Executive Roundtable, where we're talking about individuals matter. They absolutely matter. Awesome, awesome, awesome. We invite you to put in the chat where you're from, even what organization you're from. Let us know. I am your host, Yvette Owens. I have my team that's here with me, and we're ready to really open up this conversation around individuals matter. Individuals absolutely matter, especially through change, especially through the things that we've been going through globally. And the first individuals that matter are the leaders. Leaders absolutely matter. Sometimes we feel like we have to be the sacrificial lamb. We have to be the ones who are giving up so much. But this time, we also need to understand how much we matter and what are we feeling in the midst of the change in order to make sure that we are sensitive to what those who are following us are feeling and seeing. So this is going to be interactive. Again, as you're joining, let us know not only your location, but your organization, even what your role might be in the organization, because that way we can definitely hone in on how we can help you. We're talking about change. You should have received in your email this morning the workbook, and I will share that and throughout this time. So let me share my screen. And we're going to present right from the workbook. That way you can follow along with us. You can follow along and see really what we're talking about. And again, this is helping employees adapt to success and succeed through change. And I realized that this was a need and a critical point to talk about as I interviewed executives throughout various organizations just within the last 2 months. I was interested, and I often go out and say, hey, how can we help you? What are the needs? What are the things that you're finding that you need? What's keeping you awake at night? Because we want you to get rest so you can bring your best self, so you can help motivate other people to do that. So that's our conversation today. And it's really around leading with your soul. As we're helpful, as we're healthy, as we're in a good place, we can help other people get into that good place as well. So I am your host again, Yvette C. Owens. I am the founder and CEO of DestinySpeak, where I teach leaders how the change leadership principles so that people adapt more to the change and you can retain good people. And those people that you retain now are interested in becoming and do become high-performing team members. So this is the welcome, again, it's a critical conversation. All of this is in your workbook. If you want to just check your email to find this out. And if you find it, just put a 1 in the chat to let us know that you have it. And if you don't have it, put a 2 and we'll make sure we get it out to you. This is no matter what, change is always going to happen. And we're at an exponential rate of change, even when it's good. So how do we help people adapt to that space? That's really what we're here about. That's why this is important. And we're going to have more conversations that are concerning you and helping you be able to get your folks, the teams around you, whether you're an entrepreneur or a corporate hero. We're presenting these topics for the rest of the year so that you can really be equipped and empowered, because one of the things is, because you matter, then we need to nurture those souls and help you be able to get through some of those difficult situations. That's one of my sweet spots. I do help people in those difficult conversations, those difficult spots where we don't hear about it through some of the training that we have. We don't hear about it through school. We don't hear about it, but we encounter it absolutely every day. So I wanted to start with this first exercise around what's my change meter. So if you would all just reflect on the last change that you had in your professional career or personal, and how did that really affect you from a score of 1 to 10? 1 to 10, what was your tolerance level around that? Just put in the chat whether it was 1 to 10. Awesome. I'm seeing some 1s, I'm seeing some 5s, some 4s. Awesome. Okay. And when you think about that recent change that you experienced, wherever it was, what would you say in what, on a scale of 1 to 10, being extremely uncomfortable, and the resistance to the change, or being excited about the change? What would your score be for that? 1 to 10, I'm extremely uncomfortable, or I am excited. I was excited about that change. 1 to 10. Awesome, awesome. I'm seeing some 9s, I'm seeing some 8s. And that brings up the point that change is not always bad, right? Change is not always bad. And it's a lot of times about how we perceive it. But the first thing I wanted to make sure that we understand is that we need to be honest about where we are in the change, right? We need to be honest about how we feel about what's happening, so that we are relatable to the people who are around us, who we're leading through that change. Now take a moment to reflect on why you rated those 2 questions the way you did. What were the factors that contributed to your level of comfort or discomfort? What was the nature of that change itself, and where there external factors that influenced it, or was it just your reaction? And I'd like to get someone to come off chat and share just around how you felt about that. Let's get a couple of people who would be willing to share their experience. I think I'll stop sharing so we can just get to that. Anybody want to come off and share? Just
I can share something. This is Linda.
Sure, Linda.
Our company was an entrepreneurial-led company for 50 years, and a private equity corporation purchased us. And it meant tremendous change culturally, strategically, product-wise, and it was a good change in the sense that, from a strategic perspective, the company wasn't going to be able to continue doing business the way they'd been doing. So I was excited that we had that change. And I was also excited from the standpoint that the entrepreneur who started the company doesn't understand how to operate in a corporate world. And so it was important to make that change for the survival of the business. So it was a significant change. And what was difficult about it was that we weren't prepared with change management information for our teams. It went so quickly that we were just like, boom, one day we're this, tomorrow we're that. Of course, the fact that we're in the middle of COVID and also in the middle of being evacuated for major fires from the corporate headquarters. Other than that, it was a difficult process because we didn't have time to attend to the employees' needs about change.
So if I could just piggyback off of that, because thank you for sharing that. And it sounded like it was well known that the company needed some help, which is why you were able to receive it in a most positive way. Would that be a fair assessment?
Yeah, I would think so. Well, at my level, at the senior management level, yes.
Yeah. And so the more information we have, the better we're able to adapt to the change. And so we know this might not feel good in the midst of it, but we know it's for our good. Anybody else had that experience, that you've been in a situation and it's like, this might not feel good. We know it might be extra work, but it's good for us all in the long run. If you've had that experience, put yes in the chat. Anybody else want to share?
I'll share.
Mm-hmm.
I was in the position, I was hired for a position for over the whole department. But because I was doing it for like 40 or 30 years somewhere else, it was very difficult to kind of like apply some of the new things that my executive leader wanted me to do. But once I gave into the resistance to the change, I actually increased in some of the knowledge and skill level that I had as well. But at first, you know, like you've been doing the same thing for like 40, 30 years, 20, 30 years, you know, and it was a different environment. So they had different things that I had to adjust to, which kind of like made me step back and look at, I don't want, you know, the change was kind of fearful for me.
Right. Yeah, and that's something we need to be honest about. Okay, our debt, we can unmute our debt because she wants to, and I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. She wants to also contribute. So if we can unmute her, and while we're getting her ready to speak, that's being really real, right? There's some fear sometimes, there's some doubt, even if we know that it's the right thing, will it work? Will we be able to survive that? And
She's
so,
unmuted.
okay, our debt, yeah, go ahead.
Hi. Yeah, one of my experiences was that I actually had to have major surgery. So that was a change for me. It changed my voice. It changed a lot of things, and wrapping my head around giving that over to the doctors and ensuring that, just having faith that I knew I was going to be okay. So that was a dramatic change for me in the last year. And I was uncomfortable, but and I was a little worried about coming back into the office with a new voice. But I'm working my way through it.
Yeah, I mean, that's a major change. First of all, are you going to overexert that voice, right?
Yeah.
And then are you going to still be able to perform, especially if you talk a lot in your job, which I'm assuming you do. And then having to be able to, so there are personal changes, there are external changes, there are external factors, there are factors that really are going to be more for the benefit of the organization as well as us. But we have to be upfront with our fear, our doubts, and even balancing that excitement that we know is good, but other people around us may not feel that it's good or understand how well it's going to be for us. And so how do we balance it to carry that message forward? So I wanted to share with you also in your workbook, and I won't switch back there, but if you go to that page, it says, did you know that 69% of employees say that change at work has a negative impact? 69%. So Linda shared that this was a positive thing for her, but there's 69% of the people, when they go through change, they feel like it's not a positive thing. And then 58% of employees feel that they have experienced resistance and pushback from colleagues along the way. And some of those factors that really impact people from adopting the change are communication shows up first. 94% of the people say it wasn't communicated well. Employee involvement, they weren't included in the beginning. And then the training and development. And so I want to talk to you about being a champion of change communication, because the more people understand what's happening, the more they have options, the more they can understand and foresee. And I always say this, if you don't tell the story and give them the information, they will make it up. They will make it up. And how many of you know people can get really creative in the stories that they come up with as to why we're doing a change and what's happening through that. And we want those around us to really succeed in the change and through the change. So first and foremost, we want to commit to the change personally, and we want to get the people around us committed to that change. And the way we do that is involve them in the beginning. There's a lot of strategic planning that happens with every change. most organizations don't figure out that, oh, we're just going to do something and then go for doing it. But we often don't include those leaders in the beginning. And therefore, I mean, in the people who are impacted in the beginning, and therefore it's hard to help the momentum of that change happen. And it has to be cascaded down through all levels of leadership and through the masses so that they understand, I'm committed and these are the reasons why. Be clear about the connections. How does this connect to my customers? How does this connect to my other project that I'm signed up for? And then concise. And so I'm giving you those 5 C's around being that champion for a change communication. Commit, be clear on your connections, how it's connected to the work that's already underway, how is it connected to their roles, and then be concise. Sometimes we talk too much. Sometimes we share too much. We want to be forthright, but let's not over-explain, because sometimes in over-explaining that gets to be very difficult. And then be consistent. That's C number 4. And then confirm what we know, and confirm that, you know, we're still working on these things. And when people are when you're transparent and doing that, they are those 5 C's that will help you bring it along. And then there's key components. So I want to again ask you to reflect on a change that you have either underway or that's in the midst of what's happening. And what are those 4 key components that affect change communication? What are those 4? The first one is share the vision. Share the vision. Where are we going? Why are we going there? Why are we heading there? And then tell it as a story. Tell a story around it. You want to make, that's number 2. You want to frame it in a perspective that this is the way we're going and why and how it's going to be beneficial and what's going to come out of it and what are the other things it will lead us to. Reframe it in a story and make the people who are part of your organization the heroes of the story. So if I'm in a technology space and I have a business analyst, I have a developer, I have a quality engineer, I'm not going to just say, oh, I'm giving you this task, quality engineer and BA, I need you to just go out and figure out around the business concepts, and developer, you're just going to code and we just need you to code this. No, I'm going to frame it in a perspective that we're coming together as a development team. And because the business analyst is out there making sure that our business partners understand the work that we're doing, and this business component is going to really speed up the process. It's going to make our decision-making even easier. And so this is why it's critical for the business. And then that quality engineer is putting in place all the things that are going to really make sure that we are compliant. When I frame the story with the people who are impacted by the story as the heroes of the story, then I get better adoption. And then 4th is chart the path. Where are we going? What's the steps? What's the next step? What's the next step? Oh, did we have a diversion? Did we have to go a different way? Chart the path. Because as long as they see you going and they know that you're thinking ahead, they will follow you. I say to my teams often, I say, I'm showing up and I'm going to play the role that you're expecting me to play because that's the role I'm in. And each one of you are a valuable asset, a valuable individual to us achieving what we need to achieve on this effort. And so I'm expecting every one of you to come as that expert, authentic, ready to go, and really respond to the needs of this effort. Now you can count on me, and I want to be able to count on you. And when you do that, now everybody knows, wait, I'm not just showing up as the accountant. I'm not just showing up as an admin. I'm not just showing up even as this, I have a real role here, and I need to stay strong and committed in my role so that we together succeed. I'd love to hear some of your stories on how you were able to champion and communicate a change that made all the difference or made some difference in how that change went about. Let's hear from some of you. Anybody want to share?
I'll share. So we're actually in the midst of a lot of change now as the organization grows and trying to scale up. And I think one important thing that you mentioned that I can't express enough is the communication and allowing people to provide input to the change. So a lot of things, you know, like we kind of have run through and decided, and then we'll go to the different teams and let them know, okay, this is the direction that we're going, this is direction that we're taking, and then we get their input. And when receiving their input, we're very transparent about, okay, what's already decided and what we can still consider, right? Because one thing we don't want to do is get their input and we know that we've already made a decision, and regardless of what they say, nothing's going to change. So being transparent around, even when you're getting buy-in and receiving input around what portions have already been decided at a higher level and what portions of the change their input can still you know, make a difference, what make a impact, or what we're going to consider their input, I think is very clear. And I think what I find with most people is that transparency helps, right? You know, don't even, they want to hear what's already been decided, so it's still good to tell them that, but don't ask for input if you know that you're not even going to be able to consider it, or the input isn't going to make an impact, because then it's just not authentic, and people know that right away. So that's just something.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, people know that, oh, well, they asked us, but they didn't consider. Now, it could be something that you asked for input and then a decision is made that we can't do it. And just go back and say, we did consider it. And for these reasons, whatever you can reveal, this is why we can't do that thing, or why we're moving in this direction. The important thing is the communication being, and then the other thing is, we don't know right now. That's powerful. We don't know right now, and we're still working on it. They don't, our people, the people who we're working with, don't expect us to know everything. They don't expect us to be heroes. And the more that we are vulnerable and transparent to them, the more that they can relate, they find us relatable, and they can say, oh, okay, I can trust them because I know they don't act like they have it all together. And I know we want to show up that way, but sometimes there's more power in being vulnerable and honest and transparent than there is making up things as if we know. Anyone else want to share? So of these 4 areas, and while anybody, and if you want to share, just raise your hand and things like that. If of these 4 areas, which ones do you feel that you could improve upon? These key 4 areas, which 3 do you think you can improve upon? Put in the chat. Which 3 do you think would be most helpful for you to focus on to improve upon? All right. Okay, and so when we're talking about communication, doing change, and making sure that people are successful, we want to make sure that we're speaking from their frame of reference, right? Because many people responded to this because their frame of reference was, hey, I need to be able to help my employees succeed in all this volume of change that we're experiencing. I need to help my employees really be successful for this change. And so my response was, let's talk about it at an executive roundtable. And many people showed up because of that, because it's difficult to keep people motivated. And so how do we speak from their frame of reference? How do we even know what that is? First of all, we have active listening. I'm really listening to what they're saying. And oftentimes we get in trap of, I got to move at a really fast pace. I got to get these things going. And so I'm hearing, but I'm not listening. So we need to have active listening. We also would be helpful to acknowledge their perspective. That doesn't mean I agree, but I acknowledge their perspective. I get it. I understand. I can see why you might feel that way. That's the kind of language we say when we are acknowledging their perspective, and then use the language they understand. When someone's talking, it's like, say back to them what they just said, which means you're acknowledge what they said, you're acknowledging their perspective, and you're actually hearing. And then find common ground. So again, just because you hear doesn't necessarily mean that you agree with everything, but find some common ground that you can now start to build an even stronger relationship, and then help them move from resistance to more adaptation to the change. I hope that makes sense. If that makes sense, put a 1 in the chat. Put a 1 in the chat if this is making sense, if this is resonating with where you have been in the space of helping people around you really adapt to the changes and come back off of some of the resistance. And I want to just step into the resistance, because it's like, we need to lean towards the resistance. Leaders who want to push away from the resistance, oh, they always are negative. Oh, they just can't find anything. I have people in my life that you say, oh, we're going to go to the Bahamas. And their first response is, oh, we've been there before. That's not going to be good. You know, airlines, it's going to be everything negative just spewing out of them. And it's like, hold up, we're going to the Bahamas, you know? And so it's like, and then they come around. And so we want to make sure that we are okay for those naysayers to get that off their chest, because that's just the way, that's their frame of reference. And now dig deep in there, because can I tell you, there's gold. There's gold in them here, resistant hills. There's gold there. There's gold, and they will once you get there, it's again acknowledging their perspective, showing that you've listened, and then you can move them closer to adoption or investigate, is it real? Is that resistance real and something that needs to be addressed? Or is it something they made up just because they didn't have the right information? And if it's false, you now have the opportunity to correct that thinking by giving them more information. Does that make sense? If yes, yes, put yes in the chat if that's making sense. And then 4, so we talked about listen actively, acknowledging their perspective, use language that they understand, find common ground, and then adapt your communication style. And I know we like to say, oh, this is my communication style. This is my style. I do it all the time, but the greatest of leaders can flex. I mentioned this in my book, No Bosses Allowed, Lead to Serve and Transform, where I talk about comparing the ability to be able to flex your leadership style and not just stay in your comfort zone. So I'd like to open up the chat and talk about, and have us just share, have we had experiences where we've been able to flex our leadership style and how the benefits have come from that? Has anybody, especially in change, where your stretch and your growth came out of the fact that you were able to switch up your approach so that people really adhered and came along with you on that change? Anyone? Is there anyone that has any experience in that and wants to share? And while you're thinking about that and wanting to share, there's common questions to ask when identifying the impacted audiences. We want to make sure we're getting those impacted audiences and identifying them up front when the strategic planning, so that we can help those people who are going to be impacted succeed. When I know how it's going to impact them, then I can help figure out how I can support them better through that change. And so some of the questions you would want to ask: who is going to feel the change and why? Who is going to feel this change and why? Think about even something that you're dealing with right now. Who is going to feel it and why? And can they trust you to represent you in this change? Do you have enough currency in that relationship that they can absolutely trust you? And then how do you build and maintain that trust? And then finally, what are some trust killers in our behaviors and our leadership that is diminishing our ability to be able to help that change happen? Who is it going to feel it the most? Do they trust me to represent them so that I can get the information? And what are some of those trust killers? Is it some of the words I say? Is it some of the words I don't say?
Marguerite made a great post in a great comment in the chat. She says, trust killers are actions and words not aligning.
Right.
That's great. That's good. That's
Yeah.
good.
Yes, definitely. If you're saying one thing and your behavior is a different thing.
That's, yeah.
I was coaching a group and the leadership asked me to come in and help coach this group. But the leadership was saying one thing, even though they asked me to share and help the group move another direction, to come together. But they were literally saying to them in the individual meetings, oh, don't worry about this. Just for now, keep it going. Because they were so desperate to keep things moving and not to lose traction. They were literally telling these leaders, just keep doing what you're doing. It'll all work out. It'll all work out. So what the leaders were hearing is, I don't have to figure out how we're going to come together as a team, which they were now being formed to come together as a team, a closer working team, because they were individual separate teams, because the leadership was saying, oh, it'll work out, just keep doing what you're doing. People heard, I don't need to listen to this consultant. I don't need to listen to my leader who's now being charged with bringing us all together. And it really crumbled. And that leader who was in charge of that whole effort to bring it all together, he ended up leaving that organization because he was pushing up a hill and the senior leadership was saying something different to the individual leaders that they were saying to the organization. Does that make sense? If that makes sense, put a yes. So I would really love to hear from some of you before we move forward. What has been some of your challenges working with facilitating change and being able to get momentum moving, or even supporting and making sure that the people that you're leading really feel safe? Because we really have to help them feel safe in sharing where they are and what they're feeling. What have been some of your challenges in that space or successes?
I think for me, sorry,
Go ahead.
I've done HR for many years. I'm very passionate about that. And what I experienced as challenges was exactly what I wrote there, is work, because you're the middleman. You're almost the comfort blanket in a way for change, the employees and the bosses and the leaders. So my challenges was some leaders with their actions and words. How do you keep the people safe when the leader, so it's very challenging me as a person, my values, and that is, I think, where, I don't know how to say it, but that's where big challenges come in because you're trying to steer, the changes and keeping the the employees safe, but it is unfortunately sometimes not safe, you know,
Right.
to be that direct. So it is a challenge. And then it's almost, I think the ideal culture would be one of honesty and integrity, but it's not, unfortunately. And that's why I started my own business as well, because I did see that in the corporate world. And for me, I'm a very straightforward person, actions, words, there you go, it's easy. But
Right.
unfortunately, in some of the cultures, it's not like that. And I think you addressing this is very, very needed in a time, because there's big changes overall.
Yeah, I was thinking this morning as I was thinking about sharing with you all and having you all share with me that I was reflecting on my experience, and I had many times when I've had to still show up strong for my team and be the leader for my team that I wanted to have for myself. And so how do you, how do you get that strength to keep showing up with integrity, with accuracy, with transparency for the people around you that's depending on you when you can't do that for yourself? And it's almost to what you're saying, Margaret. It's like becoming your own owner, acting like we often hear act like an owner. And it's like, okay, I'm going to care about my integrity, my reputation enough that no matter what I'm getting or not getting, I am going to be here and I'm going to serve to the best capacity for the people who are depending on me. And that's not always an easy place to get to, because we all want the same support that we're giving out to somebody else. But in reality, it's our reality. Sometimes we just have to put on, I'm going to be the owner of this. This is my charge. Whether I'm supported or not, I'm going to support the people like I would like to be supported. Someone else wanted to share. I heard somebody else.
It was me. I was going to say just exactly what you just said. My challenge is validation a lot. Because I'm mostly, I would say, in the music industry. And so like it's very competitive. It's very like, everybody wants to be a star. But when you're the admin that is handling all of that, and you're not getting, you gotta give the employees under you instruction from the leader, and they're saying one thing to you and then going back and saying something. It's like that validation is so important. It makes you feel like Marguerite said, like you're the middle person, and it makes you feel like, well, why am I even here when you don't get it? And it's just a very uncomfortable place to be in, and that's always been a challenge for me, as being the person that sits right underneath the executive leader. It's always been a challenge how to maneuver both worlds.
Yeah, and the honest thing is there are times when the most senior leader may not know how to respond in these cases, but they want you to still respond the same way you're responding, because they know it's yielding the results that it's yielding. And that's when we have to be very diplomatic in sharing to that CEO, to the COO, to the CIO, whoever it is, that here's what I'm able to accomplish and why, and ask for what we want, right? And that's sometimes difficult, but sometimes we have to model what we want for those who just don't know. And if they don't respond to that, then now you know, and now you have a decision to make, right? But yeah, they want what we're sharing. Anybody else want to share? Thank you both for sharing that. That's awesome. Anyone else having those moments and successes? So we're not saying that any of this is easy. We're not saying, that's why you're here as heroes, executives, really making and shaping the worlds that you're in, shaping the organizations that you're in, and you have a heart and a passion for not only the work, but the people. It's easy, people can always do process and technology, but not everybody does people well. And I'm so glad that each of you chose to come and at least listen into this conversation, contribute to this conversation. And even if you're not sharing today, I would love, absolutely love to hear your feedback afterwards about how you're showing up and what you found successful, because there's more and more of us who need to know I'm not the only one in this space. And when you know that there's a whole group of us. And so the last part I wanted to go over is vulnerability. And we've kind of talked about this already. Leading by example, communicating frequently and clearly, being authentic and empathetic. And apathetic doesn't mean that you have to get lost in their situation. It's just that you're able to be present in their situation. There's a difference. And building that culture of psychological safety, we've talked about that, recognizing, addressing the resistance, and providing support and resources for them to go through. So I want to open it up now. We have about 20 minutes left for any questions before we begin to wrap this up. Any questions, any thoughts? Even if you don't want to come off of mute, put your questions or comments in the chat so we can address them. This is how I've been able to, over 40 some years, to have teams come through changes very successfully, even when we knew, I had a team once that they knew that they were being really slated to be disbanded. I had one boss say to me, one leader say to me, you're going to be successful if you work yourself out of this position. And this was early in my career. And I was like, what? I need a job. And what he said, his name was Peter, and I'll never forget it. And he said, if you can work yourself out of this position, then other leaders will see your strength and they will readily bring you into their organization, because you're not afraid to do what might be the harder things. You're not afraid to make transition. You're not afraid to shape the culture in the way that we need to shape, even if it means your position is no longer needed. And he was absolutely right. He was absolutely right. Any questions, any other thoughts in the chat? Just add them to the chat. Has this been helpful for you? If this has been helpful, put a 1. If you need something else in this space, put a 2. Put a 2. If you need something else, and then of course, if you need something else and you put a 2, I'd like to hear what that is. Is this what you were expecting? Give me a 1 if this is what you were expecting by joining this. As we start to wrap up, if you are a CEO or leader, executive leader in this space, please know that there are audits that we can do to see how well the change and the readiness for change is happening in your organization. I'm happy to come in and do an audit for you to say, how effective are we doing at this change thing? How effective are we applying change principles? How effective are we really living out what we really expect to do? Are we that organization that Yvette talked about, where senior leaders said to the organization this, but on the side, they were talking a whole different language to the individual leaders? Things like that. You can schedule in your workbook, there's a link where you can schedule a discovery call, and we can absolutely schedule that time with you. None of us want our people to fail, because in all honesty, when they fail, we fail. There's nobody who fails alone. And honestly, if we're honest, nobody succeeds alone. And we need to be in a position where we're readily available and willing to acknowledge that. And we will have more and more people willing to move forward with us in the spaces that we are really going for. And change is not slowing down. I say this often. We're not going back to normal. We all have to figure out how to do business differently, more effectively, and bring people along. And if your people can trust you in this time and space, because you're communicating well, because you're being transparent, because you're vulnerable, because you're planning with them in mind at the onset and not an afterthought, and you're committed to the change, it's tough to get other people to commit to something that we're not committed to. And honestly, sometimes you need that time, you need that time out, you need that moment to say, how do I really feel about this change? Before you can bring somebody else along. And it's okay to take that time out. I said to my grandson yesterday, we were out running, he was out running around and everything, and you could see he was fighting sleep, and it's okay to be tired. It's okay to be tired. It's okay to not know or not even agree with some of the changes that's happening. But how do you get there to the point that you can lead the organization through the change? And that's where we can help. We can help you get built up and refreshed. One of the things next spring, we're having a retreat where executives, leaders can come together and really gain their joy back. I tell the story often because I don't ever want anybody else to go through what I went through, but I so long was being stripped of who I was, being stripped of the power, being stripped of my self-confidence and everything. And I was sitting at lunch with some colleagues and realized, and it just came up out of me, I want my joy back. I want my joy back. Didn't realize that I didn't even have it until in that very moment we were having lunch and we were talking. And it was like, I couldn't take it anymore. I couldn't carry that weight, that, you know, that superhero cape, that superhero mentality, or even if I didn't think I was a superhero, just carrying the weight of my team and myself without that support, I couldn't do it. And I said, I want my joy back. And I vowed then never to let anyone or anything take my joy away again, or my peace away again. And because I did that for me, I make sure that nobody does it to the people who I'm working with. I guard them like that. Because if I value me that way, I value you that way. And so we need to lead with our soul. And I had to get my soul back healthy so that I could help them. And again, even if it stops with me, it is what it is. So we invite you to join us in the next session on July 11th, where we're going to talk about giving and receiving that feedback, self-led feedback. I'm going to ask Donna to come off mute and she's going to share, as well as if you join and sign up today by 11:59 tonight, then the next session that we have on that self-led feedback is only $57. And and you can share it with your friends, share it, because I think it's a time when we need to spread duplicate ourselves. Every one of you showed up here because you have a different mindset than the norm around how to treat, process technology, but most importantly, people. Let's duplicate ourselves so that the world becomes a healthier space to work in for all of us. For all of us. It is absolutely possible to have a culture and environment, as Linda said earlier on, that's why their change was successful, because it's a culture and environment where everyone can thrive. It's not only possible, but it's absolutely necessary. And so share it. Anybody, whether they were in this session or not, if they sign up by 11:59, they get the $57 rate. Tomorrow it turns to $97. And Donna, Carter, who is a phenomenal HR professional through pharmaceutical organizations, through academic organizations. She's just through various manufacturing organizations. She comes to us with a wealth of experience, and she's going to share with us what that self-led feedback and giving and receiving looks like. Donna, do you want to share?
Sure. I had a slide. It might take me a minute to get it up.
No, I'll get it for you.
Okay, great. Hi, I'm excited. Our next session to talk about self-led feedback, and Yvette's going to bring up the slide. But as an HR professional and a leader in organizations, it's important for us to not only be able to give feedback in a self-led way, but also to receive feedback in a self-led way. So the next session, we're going to talk about a couple of things. How do you feel about feedback, giving it and receiving it? When you hear the word feedback, do you think punitive? Do you think development? Do you think, okay, I need to hear this? Also, your concern for your team, your peers, your colleagues, or whoever you need to give feedback to. Let's consider that over your own comfort, right? Be prepared for your own emotions and feelings ahead of time, and we'll discuss more. But as we go through this, I really want this to be an interactive conversation. So think about how you relate to feedback today, right? Are you good with it as long as it's positive? Recognizing within yourself what feedback does to your own emotions and your own system, right? When you get feedback, do you need a little space to consider it? And just how can we be better with this whole concept of feedback, which this word is thrown around so much, but I find that very few leaders want to give the feedback that is not always necessarily seen as positive. And it's because of our own relationship when it comes to feedback. So we're going to dig into that next quarter. I hope you all can join us and invite some of your friends, and come prepared for an interactive session that will go over feedback. Thanks, Yvette.
Awesome. Thank you. I'll leave this up just a little bit because it's really critical that we, again, all of these executive roundtable conversations is really about pouring back into each other so we can show up in a greater way. I have no doubt that you guys are successful, that you're making really impactful decisions in impactful ways for people around you. But like I said, it's not normal business as usual anymore. And we all need to elevate and figure out how we're going to show up in a very different but very strong way, and bringing everyone else along with us. And people are making choices. They're making options. As Marguerite said, she started her own business because she wasn't supported well in the spaces that she was in. But we all know that corporate needs to be still there. We all know that entrepreneurs, small businesses need people to come alongside them. And you have great talent in your organization. We are here to help you make sure that you keep that good talent, even through the changes that are inevitable in our workplaces, in our businesses, so that we keep increasing our revenue and we keep enhancing the culture, so people will be lined up to join your organization. I don't think that's just far-fetched. I think it's possible, not because they're desperate, but because they see and hear the authenticity of your leadership, the passion, and that you're leading from your soul. You're leading with your soul, which is in a healthy place. So that's why I hope you consider joining us in July, and I hope you consider joining us in next spring for the retreat, so we can all get together and really demonstrate and support one another in this space. So we've gone through, all of this is in your workbook. I'll just click through quickly. You can print this off, even do your own self-reflections based on what what you've heard today. I will send out the recordings we talked about the power of vulnerability, and then here's information about how you can get to the audits if you're interested in an audit, having an audit in your organization. And then here's our thank you. Thank you for showing up. Thank you, absolutely thank you for participating. Thank you for making a difference in your space that nobody else can make but you. Because we're all unique individuals that offer something that no one else offers. That's why I thoroughly believe in the power of collaboration. When we trust each other enough to come together to make something absolutely spectacular, and we can do that across organizations and within our organization. We just have to step up our game of leadership, especially through change, not forgetting those who we're leading. So with this, I'm going to wrap it up. If there's any other last comments or questions, I'll open that up for just the few minutes that we have. Any concerns that people have in their space, I'll stop sharing so I can see the chat. Yeah, I really believe that that we have to lead with our soul. We can't do it any other way. That's the real me. This is not. But inside, that's where my core values are. That's where my passion is. That's where my emotional intelligence is, in my soul. And when I lead from there, then I can lead with a heart to transform business. And that's what I'm destined to. That's my passion, to help leaders become stronger leaders so that they can create more people like themselves. Please share, please give us feedback. We're open to it, and we absolutely look forward to seeing you in July. Don't forget to register tonight so that you can, by tonight, so that you can get the discount. But we hope to see you all there, and share it and share it and share it. I will share the recording, and you will have access to that for a period of time before that goes away. So get back in there and listen again if you need to, get some notes. And we will see you in July. Have an amazing, amazing day. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Well done.
Let me shut the recording.